Alrighty, now that we are all here, let's get going with this, and let's have fun with it. So, literally running your applications in the cloud, it's not exactly the same anymore as when you did not do cloud. There are some things you need to know. There are some things you need to do it well. And I work as a consultant myself, and I see a lot of folks going the carefree way. They just deploy stuff to Azure and have fun with it. And you should have fun. You should. That's good. Having fun is essential. And after a while, there's a forest of things, and you don't know who owns what anymore in the cloud. Or you can start to figuring out some more facts and details and getting the really, really good knowledge that you need to run really good things in the cloud. So I want to begin by asking you, how many of you, one hand in the air or two, have a production deployment in Azure? That's about half. Assuming then the other ones in the room are kind of interested in Azure, but you haven't gone to production just yet? Okay, all right, cool. This applies equally to both, because these basic skills, the way I see it, a lot of folks don't actually know how to use Azure well, even though they might have been in Azure for a long time, and they're doing good business on Azure. They may still be spending maybe a little bit too much on their bills, and it's in a chaos mode. So that's what this presentation is about. My name is Magnus Ma. I am so happy to be here. I love getting on stage talking about things that I'm passionate about. I was the first one to be an Azure MVP in the Nordic countries, so I've been in Azure since day one. And I love it. I'm gonna say good things about Azure and Microsoft, on this stage. I don't actually work for Microsoft. It's funny because I have this title, Microsoft Regional Director. It sounds like I work for Microsoft, but I don't work for Microsoft. I don't really have a region, and I don't direct anything. But the title it's a very close partnership with Microsoft. So I use all their stuff, and I get on stage and talk about it. But I do run my own company, Loftysoft. That's me, my company. And so, that's about me. And I'm this crazy user group person. I love community. I love user group stuff. So in case you don't know what the Global Azure Bootcamp is, it's happening again for the 5th time on April 22nd. All around the world, this crazy event is happening. And any user group leader, anyone can throw an event and join this. It's got to be a couple of 100 locations around the world on one specific day. It starts, in Australia time zones over here, and it ends in Honolulu. And all these user groups do an event on the same day. It's really good fun. It's at least 10,000 attendees on this thing. I would be amiss if I didn't actually mention that when I go on stage. I kind of have to. It's my passion. Right? I love this stuff. So this is the reason we're here. I'm not going to linger on it, but the big reason we are here, the big reason people are interested in learning about what the cloud is in a way that we can do it well, is that we have hit sort of the mainstream. Those two blocks in the middle there, that's where technology goes into the 80% of the market. Before that, it's curious people having fun, early adopters, and if the technology is bad, it's going to fall into that little gap. It's called the chasm of doom. That's where bad technology goes to die. But if it jumps the chasm and gets into the mainstream, which Azure or the cloud certainly has now, then a lot of folks want it. So there's going to be, of course, a big uptake in people needing to learn how to do Azure in a good way. So Microsoft have built this cloud platform. And when you look at this slide, I'm sure some of you have seen this slide before. It's kind of a canonical slide that Microsoft used to show how much stuff we have. And it's a little bit daunting. It's like, whoa, what do I do with this? I don't even know. Well, not to worry. I mean, you can very easily go and deploy just a virtual machine if that's what you need, if that's what you want. But, still, how do I handle this? When I look at that myself, it's like, okay. What you need to do is figure out how to do the fundamental things. You need to worry about who has access to my resources. How does that work? You need to think about how do I deploy my environments in a good way and make sure that I don't make any mistakes and maybe automate that in some way. And once I do have lots of things running out there in the cloud, how do I know what the status of my things are? How is it feeling? And when something is wrong, if something goes wrong in the middle of the night, do I have some alerting in place that can, in a worst case, call me up and say, listen, you got to come into the office or turn on your computer because something is horribly wrong. So alerting is important. And then a lot of folks, I see this as a big adoption blocker. A lot of folks are concerned with the fact that they don't know how to split the bill inside of their corporation. Maybe they have different departments and everybody's using Azure. How do we know how much Azure is spent by R&D or how much Azure is spent by this production environment or that? How do we know this? Well, that's stuff that you can solve with the stuff or the following pieces, in my talk. And then now that we are in the cloud, the IT guys, it's a big change for IT. They no longer go and buy hardware and put it together and pull cables around. They're sort of part of the DevOps-y team, this world now, where they can go and provision stuff in the cloud, but they still need to maintain it. And all of those developers have learned cloud skills, and they're now showing up with applications that are running in the cloud, and we have to maintain them in IT. We still need to know how to do that. So this falls into sort of the realm of configuration or your infrastructure and your configuration as code. And what does that mean? Well, you want to deploy the same resources multiple times. You want to deploy them to multiple environments. You want that to be easy and automated and super comfy, and so that you can have confidence with what you're doing. For these reasons, and I'm sure many more, Microsoft have created the Azure Resource Manager. So what is that? Well, just quick architectural sort of lay the groundwork. All of those resources you saw in that big blue, all of these different icons, all of them have to implement a contact. They are resource providers to Azure, and it's not only Microsoft here. Other companies as well offering services in Azure, such as SendGrid, such as ClearDB, not Microsoft companies, but they're offering stuff in Azure as resources for us to use, are implementing the same model, implementing this provider contract so that they can become a provider of their service in Azure. And from the other end, we're coming towards this with all of the tooling that is being built or has been built and being improved all the time for Azure. And then, there's an API which is exposed by this provider contract. And that's how we do it. The Resource Manager helps us, again, then deploy application resources in a very fast and very, standardized way. It helps us to organize our stuff so that we know, the conversation. That database over there, whose database is that? Who deployed it? It's costing us money, but we don't know if it's in use. Can we delete it? Is it important? Who knows? That conversation. And then also to be able to control access to resources. Let's say that you have consultants coming in and out, maybe. You want to make sure that you can't even make a mistake, that you can't even deploy to the production system by accident. Oops, I meant to deploy to dev, and I accidentally chose production. Oopsie-doopsie. No, that should not be possible. That should not be possible to do, and you can set it up in such a way that this is prevented. Makes you feel more comfortable and secure. In Azure Resource Management, everything starts with resource groups, and they're really like empty buckets. You create a resource group, and into it you will put resources. The fact that a resource group has to have a location is inconsequential. You can have all the resources in a resource group in different regions around the world. Microsoft has now, 38 regions? 2 in the UK, right? I'll be using the UK South region for my demos today, and it's kind of close by here, but I might as well use Australia. So you can put lots of resources inside of your resource groups, and every resource has to be in a resource group. So it's kind of a bucket, right? It's not a fence or anything. You can still communicate with everything around you. It's just an organizational thing. So in order to, and this comes back to that infrastructure as code conversation, in order to deploy your things to Azure, you really should look into using templates. Of course, you can go to the portal and say, plus VM and create yourself a virtual machine. Yes, you can do that. But then if you want to do that all the time, or you need to do that all the time, after a while, honestly, the portal, pretty as it may be, starts to feel a little bit, do I need to do this again? So you really want to automate. And Azure Resource Management is for templates. So I have here Visual Studio Code, and this is not the simplest, most template, because this is actually like a null template. This is an empty template. Is it large enough? You can see? No? Larger? Yeah? Make it larger. There we go. So, as you can see, these things, that's all that is in a template. It's the parameters for stuff that you send in. It's variables. It's the list of resources that you might want to deploy, your databases, your virtual machines, whatever that is. And then sometimes some outputs. That's it. It's not more complicated than this. So the hello template, that one, the hello template, this is the simplest, most template that I could think of. It deploys one single resource. So it does nothing else except deploy one resource. And that resource in this case is, as you can see, it's a Microsoft.storage/storage accounts. So it's an Azure storage account where you can upload blob files and other things, right? It has a name and it has a location. So you see I'm using UK South here. And I can go and deploy this. So why don't we do that? So over here I have a little bit of PowerShell that I'm going to execute to deploy this. The first thing I'm going to do is create myself a resource group. And let's first go over to the Azure portal and see that I don't have anything. I'm focusing on the subscription where I'm going to deploy to. It's empty. There's nothing here. So if I go and execute, create myself a resource group, that should show up here. There we go. So now I have an empty bucket. Into my empty bucket, I'm going to put my resources. So we'll open up and see, yes, it's a brand new empty bucket. I'm going to use this null template file to begin with, and I'm going to execute that. I'm now firing off a template which is doing nothing. It's essentially accepting my template, checking that it's valid, and then let's see what resources we deploy. Oh, no resources. I guess we're done. So really, that's a trivial mode, right? But let's do this first template thing instead. I'll choose the other template file, and I'll fire it off. And it's now going out there to say, what's in my template? Yeah, I'm going to commission Azure to provision for you a storage account, and then I'm going to come back and check in 5 seconds. Actually, I don't know how long this is going to take. I've had varying times. Usually it's like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. But for some reasons, sometimes, this looks like it's taking long. I've seen this tick for a long time currently. Maybe it's just the UK data center. It's done. I don't know. But if I go back here and I refresh this, I now have a storage account. Okay? And so what happens if I go and re-execute this thing again? What do you think happens when I do that? I'm running it again now. What happens? Nothing, correct. Nothing happens. Because it's checking to see that that storage account is there. If I had changed anything inside of my deployment here, inside of my template, it would have changed things to be the way I want it to be. So I could go and say, well, honestly, I don't want that in UK South. I want to have that in... Oh, IntelliSense loading. Interesting. Huh. Okay, I happen to know what do we have? West Europe? This is actually a valid name as well. So if I go and change my template to say West Europe and execute this thing again, that's actually going to work. And effectively what's going to happen is it's going to move this thing over to West Europe, which is a little bit crazy. It's not actually moving it. It's probably then deleting it and putting it somewhere else. But we'll leave that aside. That's what happens. You can redeploy your templates however many times you want. Templates are, as you can see, declarative. You declare quite clearly, this is what I have, these are my resources, and this is the shape of them. I want to expose this endpoint, this IP address is what I want, things like that. You'll put everything in there to declare very clearly what your environment is. And as we just saw, this is idempotent. If I execute it again, I'll get the same result. Now, honestly, nothing could be easier here. You can just go and deploy multiple services. I just did one storage account just to show you the basics. I've seen templates with 15 more different resources, and you just deploy them like that, and anywhere in the world, and it's very stable, right? Always works, basically. And of course, as you can imagine, this type thing you saw there for a storage account, that's extensible to the end of days. I mean, they can add whatever services they want to Azure, and it's going to extend, and it's going to be great. So literally, again, you deploy and manage and monitor your resources as a group, right? And you can repeatedly deploy your solution over and over and over again, and that means that you manage your infrastructure as templates, not scripts anymore. I don't mind scripts. PowerShell skills are amazing. IT guys that are proficient with PowerShell, they're like mini gods. They can do all kinds of crazy things with PowerShell. But this is more declarative. This is a little bit more clear and easy, and in that sense, more shareable inside of your organization, right? That's important too. So let's have a quiz, or let's see if any one of you can answer this question clearly. These resources, we have a web application there. And that's a virtual machine with a database. Maybe we're running Oracle or something. So it's on a virtual machine, and then it's a storage account. They make up one application. Should I deploy them to one resource group, or should I maybe create separate resource groups for my different pieces? The answer to the question is, if they have a common life cycle and management, right? That's when you probably put them in the same resource group. If they don't, then you might consider putting them in separate resource groups. So maybe if you decide that you need to remove that web application for some reason, maybe you have another thing coming and you want to remove the web application, odds are pretty good that you might still want to keep your database with the data. And maybe the storage account with some files and stuff you've uploaded, probably won't want to delete those. So it sounds like a lot like maybe the web application should be in one resource group and possibly the other two in one resource group. You know what? At the end of the day, it comes back to that dreaded "it depends." It's up to you. You can do whatever you like, so long as you understand that you can do either, and it really doesn't matter. You can do it both with all of them in one or in separate resource groups. It's absolutely fine. So, when you deploy stuff, when you work with your projects, how many environments do you have? Surely you have development and production, maybe even more than one production environment, right? You have testing, probably, some testing environments. Seems likely. Now, I don't, again, I don't actually work for Microsoft, so I don't care if you use Azure for production. You can go wherever you like with your production environments, wherever you need to be. But if you don't use Azure or the cloud for development and testing, I'm going to go out on the limb here and say I think you're kind of doing something wrong. Because nothing could be easier than using the cloud platforms for development and testing. You can just spin up any testing environment you want just for a few hours and do some testing and then delete them again, and they're gone. You can do fancy stuff such as maybe even removing your development deployments over the weekend or over the holidays when nobody's using them. It's too easy to use the cloud for development and testing not to do it. And there's no possible way that anyone can come up with a pricing model that's going to beat that. It's just super simple. So definitely use the cloud for testing and for the development. Maybe then also use it for production, and maybe you have a staging environment for that. So you have multiple environments. Does that mean that I need one template for each of my environments then? Gosh, that sounds like a lot. No, it does not mean that. Here's actually a really cool consequence of the fact that you use one template for all your environments, and then you create what's called a parameter file for each of your environments and parameterize your template. So you can fire off the exact same template that you use for your production environment. You can just change the parameters and create yourselves an identical copy of that. And then when you're testing stuff, when you're deploying to your test environment, testing stuff, you are testing on an environment which is 100% identical to your production. Because we know what it's been like before the cloud, right? You had a production environment for something, and then after a few years or after some time, that environment got replaced. There was a new investment, a new IT budget year, and there was a spending on buying a new infrastructure for the new environment, more powerful machines, right? And then the IT manager looks at that old production environment and he goes, that stuff still works. And it's actually, if I throw that out, it's like throwing money and just out the window. Let's keep that old production environment and turn it into what? Testing environment. Right. So now you're effectively testing stuff on an environment which is not equal to production, right? So how do you know what it's going to be like in production? You don't. Or you spend money on 2 identical environments at least, so you have a testing environment which is identical to production. Well, in the cloud, you can just forget about all that hassle, all that problem, and do like this instead. I have a new template. It looks like this. It's a little bit bigger, longer than the last one. So it has a website name, a SKU name, as in which size of website do I want to deploy. There are quite a few to choose from. It has a SKU capacity. How many instances do I want of my website? And it really only has in the bottom here 2 resources. It's funny because any web application in Azure needs to be in what's called an app service plan. And when you look under the covers, an app service plan is actually called a server farm. So every dev, every tech person knows what a server farm is. And then when you ask marketing guys like, a farm? Is that really the word we want to use, farm? No, let's rename that to an app service plan because it makes more sense to everybody except the tech guys, right? And then the same thing happens with web applications. It's actually underneath the covers. It's called a site. But that wasn't cool anymore because it's all about the apps. So we had to rename the websites into web apps, right? So we're doing that. But anyway, underneath the covers, you can see the real things. So here's the definition of a server farm, and underneath that, a definition of a web application. Okay? And then I have my parameter files. So I have my development parameter file. That's just going to specify a website name. And what does that mean then? Well, if we go back and see, it defines a website name, and that means that we are going to default to the SKU size of being F1. That's the free tier, the smallest possible web application for development. Perfect. We're not doing any testing on that environment. And then the SKU capacity is going to be 1. Okay, cool. So let's go over to our testing environment, and we notice that we're now adding a parameter for the SKU name, as in we don't want the free tier anymore. We're moving it up to the basic 1 tier, the little bit larger web application for testing purposes. Makes sense. And then production, what are we doing? Well, we're moving now up to the S1 size, which is the standard 1 size. It's still a reasonably small web application, but it's now in a production state size. It's a real thing, right? And the SKU capacity is 2, so we have redundancy. So I can deploy with these different parameter files different environments. So let's do that. Here's a little script, which I'm sure should be bigger. Works good to zoom in here as well. Awesome. Right, so I have 3 different environments, and I'm putting these in separate resource groups, because then I can give access differently to these. Makes sense? And then I'm going to I just had to do a for each in PowerShell. I'm not a PowerShell wizard or anything, but I can do a for each at least. And so I'm creating a resource group for each of my environment, and I'm deploying each of my environments. So if I F5 this, and in fact, this one is doing them, serializing them. So it's creating one environment, moving on to the next, and creating that, and moving on to the next. So it's now creating the first one as dev. So if I go to Azure, close this down, my list here is going to at least have increased with 1 more. So it's currently deploying my dev environment, and then it's going to continue to do my test environment, and then it's going to do my production environment. And if if we drill down and look at them, yes, there are going to be different size websites, and there are going to be different numbers of instances in them. So it's really just parameterize and reuse. And the cool thing is that you are actually using the exact same template for development and production. So you know those environments will be having the exact same resources. Maybe different sizes and stuff where it makes sense, but still. So it's almost soon we have deployed the whole thing. All right? Now, we also need help, of course. We don't want to go PowerShell all the time, but seriously, it's like 2 PowerShell commandlets. It's create resource group and create deployment. That's it. It's not difficult. But sometimes we need some tooling support, and of course, I mean, this is Microsoft, after all, and we'd expect there to be lots and lots of tooling, which there is. There's the portal, and all of the IDEs that they're supporting, Visual Studio Code that I've shown you, and also, of course, Visual Studio Code and Eclipse is there as well. So there is support for different kinds of IDEs. With the command line, I've showed you PowerShell, and there's also something called XPlat, the cross-platform command line interface. But the bottom line, again, as you saw in almost the first slide, there's a REST API, a management endpoint. That's what this is. So for PowerShell, it's really funny. Did you guys notice when Microsoft open-sourced PowerShell? So they did. On August 18th, PowerShell is open-sourced and available on Linux. So yes, Microsoft do love Linux. Yay! Just wanted to point that out. I think that's pretty cool. So now you can actually do PowerShell command line stuff on Linux. How strange is that? It's an odd world. But also there is the command line interface. So anywhere you can run Python, this is the bottom one is a Python implementation. Anywhere you can run Python, you can run that XPlat or Azure CLI or whatever you want to call it. Now, I'm going to tell you a secret. I will tell you the secret sauce of Azure. Right? When you know this, it's going to be like, huh. There is the REST API, okay? The REST API is key to everything here. And when you go to resources.azure.com, you'll get a site that looks like this, where you can drill into all the resources that you have in Azure, okay? So if you start digging into this, what do you get? Well, I can list all my subscriptions. Let's actually go to my corporate website, just for fun. It's in there as well. Never browse to my corporate website. It's really ugly. But here's my Loftysoft corporate deployment. You can see that down here I have a web application. And I can open it up and see, yeah, there it is. So when I drill all the way down here, what do I get? Well, I get the exact template for my web application. I can get the template for a whole resource group of resources, all of them, and it's right there. Every property that you can put on a web application, you can go and drill down and look at them and see what's going on there. You can even, there's a documentation tab there at the top, so you can read some of the documentation of stuff if you want to. But what you can also do, okay, so here's the secret, okay? If you look at the URL here, you see we're on management.azure.com, and then we go /subscriptions, and that's my unique subscription ID for the subscription we are in. And then we go /resources, and you'll know we need a resource group name, and that's Loftysoft Corporate, cool. Then we go /providers to see which resource are we using. Well, we're using Microsoft.web/sites. Okay, cool. And then the last / is the unique name of my web application. So what is this? Well, this is the URI for a resource, a unique identifier for my resource, my web application, the unique global locator for this thing. It's also a URL, right? It's not only a URI, it's a URL as well, because it's an endpoint to the management API. Oops, to the management API, where we were over there. Let's see. Zooming on this screen is a little bit difficult. There we go. Management API endpoint, right? So we can talk to this endpoint. But now that we have seen this kind of a secret, right, or little known fact, that the cloud is really, it's just, let's call one subscription one tree, right? With all the resources hanging, the branches would be resource groups and the individual resources would be the leaves on the tree. Well, then all of your subscriptions makes up a little forest, right? So literally, all of Azure is just a tree, or a forest, if you will. That's what it is. So kind of now that you know, it's like, huh. that makes sense all of a sudden. So not so daunting and dangerous and scary anymore, right? Now it makes a lot of sense. So you can talk to these endpoints and do stuff with them. I'm not going to do a lot of things here now, but in the interest of time and everything. But really what I can do is I can do things such as, let's see what we have here. I can do start and stop. I can start and stop my web application using the HTTP endpoint. And that would look something like this. I would go to my, excuse me. I would go to that URL, which is the URL for my web application. Furthest to the right here, you see Loftysoft, then slash some command, slash stop to stop my web application, slash start to start it. And that sounds dangerous, but it isn't, because you have to be authenticated. So I have to be signed in as somebody who has access to do this. But the fact that I can do it, yes, question?
How does authentication work if you want to call these endpoints?
Yeah, so I have to be authenticated as an organizational user in the Active Directory, which controls access here. So I am currently signed in as me. So it's certainly not insecure. It's the opposite. It's absolutely very secure. So there you go. I'm signed in as my corporate identity here, but I was already authenticated in this browser session. So yeah, you can literally make a call to your AD, receive a token, and apply the token. It's a JOT token. Put that token on your HTTP request and have it authenticated, and then you have access to do the thing. Sweet. So I think it's pretty cool, and I think this is, again, it's a little-known fact that Azure is a forest. Visual Studio Code, I kind of showed you it already. What I wanted to show was IntelliSense, that you have tooling support inside of it. Let's see if it works now. See if we can go back to, for some reason, it didn't work before. Go back to my hello template and see if I can do it. No, that one. I wanted to, it needs to connect to the internet here, it seems. So I don't know why it's not working right now, but normally you would get a list of the possible, that would be then most probably the list of I'm authenticated, so it checks to see which regions am I available to deploy to. Could be that. But anyway, it's not coming up. It doesn't matter. Tooling support is there. There's a bunch of extensions. The one I'm using here is the official Azure Resource Management tooling from Microsoft. So you can go and get that and just apply it to. The thing is, though, so I've been talking to Microsoft about this. Which tool should I use if I'm an IT pro guy? Right? How do I get good tooling? Because Visual Studio would be the flagship. That's what they're putting the most of the effort on tooling. But they're also putting effort on tooling in other places. And if I'm a typical IT pro person, I don't do development work, it's unlikely that I will want to have Visual Studio installed on my system, because it's kind of a big footprint. And then there's this licensing issue as well. But I might need to work with templates with the team, because I'm also responsible for the resources and the management of the resources, which means that I'm involved with the IOPS and the day-to-day management and monitoring. Which tool is that? Well, the answer right now is actually Visual Studio Code. And I think it's unfortunate that Visual Studio Code is called Code, but I think Microsoft needed a name for something which was, they couldn't be sued for it or something. I guess Code cannot be a protected name or something. I don't know. But anyway, it is that, and since it has support for Git and it has support for tooling and templating and that sort of stuff, that's the small footprint little development tool for developing, quote unquote, right, or maintaining resource templates. Okay, and I actually just learn and love it. It's actually quite handy. I use it a lot because I find that it's small. It makes a small footprint on my machine, and it just works and does the thing. But, let's not forget, that changes are not for everyone, right? We're humans. We don't like changes. And I keep this picture as a reminder thereof. When when wagons started to roll down the streets without a horse in front of them, when they were able to be automatically mobile on their own, these were automobiles, really scary stuff. And some people got scared of that change, so they had to put like a horse's head on the wagon to sort of take the edge of that problem for people. You know, even some of those designs had a whip holder on them, because honestly, if you don't have a whip holder, where are you going to put the whip, right? It's important. So changes, that's scary. And I think I'm going to be very, very respectful. I love IT. And there is a big change for IT. But the change is not for the worse. Well, I guess if the only thing you ever want to do is put hard drives into blades, then you're going to be sorry. But if you are willing to take that step and change and become somebody who has like a cape of power, now you never have to say no again when somebody comes in. I'd like a database. You just one? I'll give you 50 databases. You know, it doesn't matter. It used to be the case that you'd fill out a form and put it on a pile, and then in a couple of weeks, when we get the new hard drives for the SQL server, we're going to install them, and then after a while, then maybe you'll get your database. You know, it's going to take like 3 months. Now it's like, yeah, okay, PowerShell script. There you go. It's just too simple. So honestly, IT gets the most power out of Azure. It's not even dev, it's IT. It's empowering and really cool. And if anyone feels like, oh my God, I can't have my servers anymore, well, I'm sorry. Get over it. They're gone. And if you want to get started with this, I really want to point out this resource because it's super good, and it's not owned entirely by Microsoft. It's actually community contributions. If you want to, wow, excuse me. If you want to get into templating and see some examples, you should go to the GitHub repository for the Quick Start templates. These are community contributions, and there's like, there are hundreds, I think over 400 different templates. And odds are, if you need a template for something, if you need a place to start, go and check here. I'm sure there's going to be something similar to what you need. Use that as a baseline. Try to understand what the template is about and what you need in there. If you're going to do a VM, if anyone has ever deployed anyone have deployed a VM to Azure? Have you? Yeah, used a portal, probably. Yeah? You look at a VM, you go and provision a VM in Azure, and you look at that in the portal, you get like, wow, what's all it... I'm a dev guy, okay? So I understand I need a VM from time to time. That's okay. But when I provision a VM, I get what I call a big bag of crap, right? I get my VM, but I also get a VNet and a subnet and a NIC and an IP. And there's like this whole list of things. I just provisioned one thing, and I got all that stuff. What's up with that, right? But that's what it looks like. So you can go down here and check all the templates you need. Microsoft even went so far as to make that into a pretty site, where you can search and look for the quick start templates that you need. And I think they're listing at 447 templates maintained by the community. So really, there's a good place to start. So I want to call that out. I think that's the most important resource for templating, honestly. So you can also, of course, use code. And this is an example of the latest version of the .NET SDK. Of course, there's one for Java, et cetera, but here's one with a Fluent interface. You could, of course, fire off a template from code, but here you can actually go in code and say, I want to have that with that with that. I want to have it in this region with this resource group, and then I want to have this network, and so on and so forth. Okay? So the create call at the bottom will effectively provision a Windows Server 2012 R2 Data Center Edition and some settings on that. It's pretty cool. So anything you need to do, I don't have a demo of this even today, but I just wanted to show it. Yes, of course, you can build like a portal experience for your customers where they can go and provision things or something like that. That works as well. So these are the basic facts of ARM. And I want to spend like the rest of this session talking about what does this mean. ARM and templating is a very, very fundamental, it's a baselining thing. Okay? It's a baselining thing. And on top of that, you can start taking advantage of it and do really cool stuff. They've also, of course, added role-based access control to the cloud. And you can sort of combine templating and access to your resources with role-based access control. Gives you a way to set very granular permissions on things. You can assign that to users, to groups. You got built-in roles to get started. If you need a specialized rule or role, you can create your own custom ones and apply them to your subscription. And you can see, okay, I now have this role, which I can assign to users, to groups, which gives them exactly the permission they need. It's very, very flexible and quite cool. So that turns into this hierarchical thing. Well, we all understand how a corporate pyramid works. There's the boss at the top there with the red polo. That kind of looks like Scott Guthrie. And then we have his managers, and their managers' managers. And you know that's a dev guy because he got a black shirt with 404 on the front. But anyway, they're trying to be over explicit here. In fact, let me just remove that. Do you know that trick in PowerPoint? You can hit B, get a black screen. Yeah, it's cool. If you hit W, you get a white screen, and then you can do like shadow figures and stuff. But if you hit B and just want to talk for a while, people don't have to look at those pictures and can just talk. That's cool. Anyway, sorry, I digress. Right, so what you would typically do, of course, you would have an owner of a subscription. And that owner would then dish out ownership to like a resource group or a small space where a project might be working. Then put an owner on that product, on that resource group, maybe a project manager, somebody as the owner on that. And that person would create groups of his teams in the Active Directory and grant them maybe contributor access to the development environment, maybe read-only access to the production environment, stuff like that. You can put very granular, detailed access control rules here. For just one example, you can have a dev team with a resource group for their development. They can do whatever they want in there. Then you have a production environment. They have read-only, but you can add a staging environment in the production space for deploying web applications, and then allow the development team to do staging deployments. But maybe they don't have the permission to swap the staging into production. Maybe that's the DevOps guy's role. He has that special permission so that he can do that swap. You can do this detailed setup to enable not only control and constrain your employees. That's not the point. The point is you can really give them the security of being able to move freely without accidentally nudging something over and spilling the coffee. Right? That's what you want. You want them to feel secure. So on the enterprise space of things, you should focus on organizational accounts. You should never use the Microsoft accounts to sign in. You should use your corporate credentials. I use only my corporate credentials when logging into Azure all the time, never my Microsoft account. You should focus on resource group access and manage those groups in your Active Directory, so that you're able to grant least privilege access, and then whenever access changes, you keep tabs on that. This is actually just basic cleanliness, if you ask me. But the fact that you can do it is brilliant. The fact that most people are not doing it is actually true, right? I've seen it all the time, and so a lot of folks don't know how to do this. Now, on the billing side of things, you can add tags to any resource in Azure, key value pair tags, right? That's what you can do. It's really, really handy. If you have a growing service catalog, you need cost control. Maybe you want specific resources in specific regions. You tag them. You can put tags in your templates, and you deploy, and you can go to the portal and open up the little tags blade or properties window where you can edit your tags. So you can have department R&D, department something else, finance, whatever that is. And that means that you can then effectively filter out all the resources with a specific tag easily. And you can go and find out, well, who owns this resource? Well, it belongs to R&D. I see. Well, now it's not a mystery anymore. So now we can actually go to the R&D department, and you guys have a database out there with your name on it. What's it for? And also, of course, grouping the costs. At the end of the month, you unfortunately get a bill, right? And then you can give that to the Excel people, and those people love that. They can go and filter on, see, oh, this is how much R&D is costing us, and this is how much that is costing us. Perfect. You can break it down and get all the numbers. That's what you use tags for. And then it's nice to be able to see that everything is tagged in proper order, but you can actually enforce a lot of stuff on your subscriptions using policies. And policy is very handy, especially if you're an enterprise. Maybe you have rules in your company, that there are certain things we are allowed to do and certain things we are not allowed to do. Okay? Maybe we're not allowed to deploy databases in Asia. We have to deploy databases in Europe, compliance reasons. That's important to us. Maybe a developer thinks it's really cool to create a Godzilla-sized machine because he just thinks it's fun. Well, fun costs a lot of money because the Godzilla-sized machines in Azure, they're awesome and also very expensive. You can actually constrain and say, no, we're not allowed to use those machines. It's just, well, it is funny, I grant you that, but it's also very expensive, right? So you can enforce all kinds of conventions and rules. You can limit to what types of instances need to be deployed, which regions are we allowed to use, require tags for departmental chargeback. You're not allowed to deploy unless you have the proper tags. Sorry, we're not doing it. Okay? Very simple stuff. It's an if conditional statements and then something happens. Deny, audit this, append, change it. So here's an example of that. If the location is UK West or UK South, then deny. We're not allowed to, I don't know why, but we're not allowed to deploy to UK. Okay then. So if you apply this policy to your subscription or to your resource group or something, that will be evaluated when somebody does a deployment against it, and that will effectively check to see if there's any UK deployments not happening. Here's another one. To deny, if you don't have the proper tags, then deny. Has to have cost center tag, otherwise no go. This is a very mean way of doing it. It's like you either play ball or you don't play at all. Another way of doing it, and this is a little bit smaller, but I wanted to have that extra example. Another way of doing it is to say, well, if there are tags and and there doesn't exist a cost center tag, if that's not there, then append the cost center tag of R&D. So if you have a resource group which belongs to R&D, those folks will go and create and delete and do stuff. They're R&D. That's what they're supposed to be doing, right? And they maybe want to do something quick and simple in the portal and, forget about it and stuff, right? And that's okay, they get to do that, but we still want to charge back to R&D all the costs of R&D. So that resource group can have this append thing in place. That means that the R&D folks don't have to worry about that tagging thing when they're just doing quick things back and forth. And it gets automatically appended. So this is the nice manager version, right? The other one's just deny. And this one is, okay, fine, I'll fix it for you, right? So both of them works. So after a policy is evaluated, the important thing on this slide is that there is an audit trail. And you can also, of course, have alerts on this. If somebody deploys to Asia, alerts, right? That works. So you can do all those kinds of alerting and things, and audit trails are being kept. Some people need the audit trails for compliance, right? And audit resources kind of look like this. It's a bit of JSON to define exactly what happened here. You can determine from these audit trails all these things, like who initiated this operation, when did that occur, on what resources did that happen, what was the result of this. So it's all audited, everything you do with your resources. It's good to know. And let's quickly just go into that and see, because I've made some deployments even now, right? So if I go into the thing called Monitor, I urge you guys definitely take a look at Monitor. It's an awesome place. The first thing that pops up is, in fact, the activity log, that thing, and it actually does an automatic search on the latest hour of things that I have done. You can see that I've done update website here. I've done validations. I've done, these are all the things that I have done during this session. It's right there. The stuff that I did actually was not prevented, so in this case, it all worked, but I do have on the slide here a couple of examples where it didn't work, some red stuff. And if you have an error, you can get alerted on that. So when somebody's messing with stuff they shouldn't be, well, then you'll find out. So really, why do we want this? Well, of course we want this. We are removing human error. We're making it automated. We're making it more secure. We get cost savings, spend control. We get we know that we have environment parity between production and testing, and it's all there, simple, fast. And the last one, when you know that whenever you say that word, you actually have to say it 3 times. Automation, automation, automation. That's the key. You have to have that. It's so simple. I've shown you how easy this is. Obviously, everyone wants this. I know. I've drunken my fair share of Kool-Aid this morning. I can't help myself. So, guys, what do you think? Do you have any questions? Do you like this? Is this good? Yes. Thanks. So, any thoughts? Any additional questions on this? We got time. We got 10 minutes. Yeah. If the company's policy is that it can't really cost anything? You can't host on the cloud. Why? Well, like I said before, you don't have to go to production in the cloud. That's fine. But I'm sure you can do development and testing in the cloud. Yeah, I get that, but you don't have to have the real database in the cloud, right? You can randomize the database with data which isn't secret. And then you can use the cloud for development and testing. That's going to still save you so much, it's crazy. I know like a very large furniture company in Sweden, I'm not going to say which one, they have in their basement, they have about 1,000 test servers. Can you imagine the cost of just running and maintaining 1,000 physical machines for testing purposes? That's crazy talk, right? You should just go to the cloud and get it done. Especially the fact that you can just delete environments and come back after the weekend and spin them up automatically again. There's no comparison, really, none. And if you have issues with this, call me. I'll be your. Right. Yeah, I know. Compliance, I get it. It's not easy. Certainly, it's not easy, but it's fun. Yeah. Well, that's the first step. Yeah. This is perfect for testing. I just wanted a test machine, just right now, a Linux box, some special installation, 3-4 hours, delete, I'm done. Perfect. Thanks. Yes?
Unfortunately, if your production environment is not in the cloud, your production environment will be different.
Yeah, that's true. If your production environment is not in the cloud, it will be different. Yes, at that point you will need to have a testing environment also not in the cloud, and that kind of sucks. It kind of beats half the purpose here. But yeah, you can still run almost the same stuff in the cloud and do your initial testing there, and then move to a proper testing environment, even though we don't want to. Right, yes, I agree. And the best of the best is when you can do your development, testing, and staging in the cloud and have all your environments there. That's a sweet spot. Did you have a question?
Yeah. What's this Azure on-prem?
Azure on-prem. Oh yeah, that's a completely different topic. So yeah, Azure on-prem is the current incarnation is called Azure Stack. And if you do have Azure Stack, you get some of the features of Azure, definitely not all of them. You get like web storage, web applications, and some, there's a handful of them. So this big chart goes down to a handful or two. And probably that number is growing. But it's actually quite a bit of an investment. There are some pretty big requirements on those physical machines you actually get and install yourself. And then you install the Azure Stack on that, which gives you the ARM model. So you can actually literally deploy the same template to the public Azure cloud as you would to your private Azure cloud. So that kind of helps, but it's not cheap, And for some organizations, still a good deal. Yeah. So that's what that is.
That would be in-house. That would be in-house.
In-house, yeah. You can even, I don't know for sure, but I was talking to them a while ago. At that point, you actually had to have the public Azure Active Directory. You couldn't use a private AD or offline the whole thing, but that's coming. If it's not there already, it might be since I talked to them. Like you can go completely off the grid. Just remove the internet from your servers and run your perfectly fine local cloud inside of there. You'd probably run that against an underground AD and have your resources. Still might be good if you're like the government or like military or somebody. And then that would work.
You
Yeah?
Why you have bosses who don't like cloud?
The public cloud, yeah. They need a private cloud, yeah. Well, show them the bill for that and see if they change their mind. All right. We have time for one or two more questions. Yes?
So when you create a resource,
Yes.
that resource has dependent resources.
Yes.
So is that the way to figure that out? Is
Yes.
quick start templates.
Yes, the question is, if you have a resource and it depends on other resources, is there a way to figure that out? I just showed you the most basic thing, like 1, 2 resources. And actually, in the one that I did show, the web application has to be, let me go to that. The web application has to be inside of a web farm, right? So that one. Here you have, and this is still trivial level. It's one resource depending on one other resource, so it's still trivial. So the web server farm here has a name, a unique name and such, and you can resolve that name and then say, I depend on that other resource. Okay, so if you upload the template to Azure, Azure will first validate, is this a valid template? Does everything make sense? You didn't make a syntactical error or something like that? Yes, it makes sense. Okay, what do we have? 2 resources. Okay, aha, one resource depends on the other. I will go and provision, of course, the one resource first and the other resource after. And these dependencies can be really complicated. If you do a VM, you are dependent on 1 or 2 or more storage accounts. You're dependent on a VNet and a subnet inside of the VNet. Well, the subnet's dependent on the VNet, and blah, 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 blah. So sure, go and look at those samples. They can become, a couple of hundred lines of template, and they can become complicated. Sure, you can always make it arbitrarily complicated, but the trick is if you can make it simple. But yes, it validates this and takes care of everything for you. And if it can then, so it parallelizes things. If it can go and create the storage account and the VNet and the NIC and stuff parallel, it'll do that. And then when all of those are done, it'll go and create the VM.
Are those dependencies documented somewhere?
There.
Other than the templates?
No, not outside of the template. Well, what do you mean? Documented as in the Azure documentation? Sure, I'm sure they are. If you go and read about a VM, you understand which ones, like which resources do you also need if you need a VM. You need a place where you store the VHD for the OS disk. Well, then you need a storage account, and then you need yeah. That's what I said, when I said that you get this whole box of crap when I want a VM, and you get like 6 things. Weird. That's crazy. Yeah. Final question, anyone? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So the question is on the tagging thing. If you apply tags to if you have a tag on a resource group, do you also get the tag applied to the sub resources inside of there? And can you also use the tags for something else? Well, the main thing for using tags is obviously to be able to group things together across, even across subscriptions, even across, so they have the same, these are your key value pairs. You control them, you decide what makes sense inside of your organization. You define which tags you use. And then you can go and search and get all the resources belonging to a tag. That's the main reason for having them. And of course, that applies to splitting the bill at the end of the month. That's the main thing. Can it be used for something else? Honestly, tagging is an organizational thing. It helps you make sense of your resources in Azure. If you're an enterprise and you have hundreds of VMs, wow, you kind of need tags now. You kind of need to be able to figure out, you can put a person's name there, right? Bob is responsible for that machine.
So like a summary,
Yeah.
resource group are needed for more easy control of access to different
Yes.
group of
Yes.
components.
Yes.
Text is more like to monitor spending.
Yes, that's correct. So good observation, and I didn't actually answer your entire question. I did not say, so if you have a tag on a resource group, it doesn't automatically apply under resources in the resource group. And yes, you are correct. A resource group is like a grouping thing where you put things that logically belong to one another. And that gives you a way to control access to those resources. Perfect, because you typically want to control access to them as a unity. And then the tagging is more like, I want to put a little label here. That's what we did. We used to do tagging in the physical data center, right? There was a little tag. This server, its name is Hilda, right? It's the SQL server, right? That's the same thing. We put a little tag there to say what it is. Exactly right. Perfect. You did my summary for me. Right, thank you. So, to round things off here, I love this stuff. I hope you noticed that I'm excited about it. I really do. This is the most fun I can imagine to be allowed to talk about things that I'm passionate of. There are some new challenges in the cloud here, and learning to use Azure the proper way will pay back. Simple as that. If you learn these skills, that is going to help you so much. It's going to come back to you. It's worth it, right? And I don't mean to make this whole presentation sound like a sales pitch, but I do have a training course on this in case you're interested. And that was, I couldn't help myself. I apologize. Thank you, guys. I am out of time. Thank you for your participation, cooperation, the questions. Loved it. Thank you.